December 18, 1944. 0547 hours. Somewhere in the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Private First Class Elijah Eli Thornton crouched behind a snow-covered spruce, his breath forming ice crystals on his beard. 40 yards ahead, 3 German soldiers examined American tire tracks in the fresh snow. Eli's M1 Garand lay across his knees. His ammunition pouch hung open at his side. Inside were 8 rifle rounds and something that shouldn't be there. Something that would change how the United States Army conducted reconnaissance operations for the rest of the war. Before we continue with Eli Thornton's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to the Ardennes Forest. December 18, 1944, where Eli Thornton was about to employ a technique that would save dozens of American reconnaissance patrols in the coming months. The German patrol moved closer. Eli didn't reach for his rifle. Elijah Thornton was 24 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and had spent his entire life in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana until October 1943. He'd grown up in Darby, a logging town with 312 residents, where his father ran a small sawmill. Eli had learned to track elk before he learned to read. He could identify animal prints in snow, mud, or dust. He knew how to move through forest without sound, how to read weather in the behavior of birds, how to survive alone for weeks with minimal supplies. He'd enlisted after his younger brother Tommy died at Anzio. Tommy had been 19. The Western Union telegram arrived on March 3, 1944. Their mother hadn't spoken for 3 days. Eli walked into the Missoula recruitment office on March 6th and signed papers that afternoon. Basic training at Camp Roberts, California, lasted 12 weeks. The drill instructors noticed Eli immediately, not because he excelled at marching or rifle maintenance, but because he disappeared during field exercises and reappeared hours later having completed reconnaissance objectives that other trainees hadn't even located. During a night navigation course in July 1944, Eli identified and mapped 17 enemy positions that the exercise designers hadn't planned for. They were training cadre who'd gotten lost. By September 1944, Eli was assigned to the 99th Infantry Division as a reconnaissance scout. He shipped to England in October, crossed to France in November, and moved into Belgium's Ardennes region in early December as part of the thinly stretched American line, holding 80 miles of forest with divisions that had been depleted by months of combat. The problem emerged within Eli's first week of reconnaissance patrols. Between December 3rd and December 16th, 1944, the 99th Infantry Division lost 23 reconnaissance scouts, all killed the same way. German patrols detected American scouts, surrounded them, and eliminated them before they could report enemy positions or movements. The pattern was consistent and deadly. The German forces were preparing for what would become the Battle of the Bulge, a massive offensive involving 200,000 German troops, 400 tanks and assault guns concentrated in the Ardennes forest. German commanders needed the American scouts eliminated. Every Allied reconnaissance patrol that penetrated German lines represented a threat to operational security. American doctrine called for scouts to move in 2-man teams, armed with M1 Garand rifles and standard-issue equipment. The rifles were excellent weapons, accurate, reliable, semi-automatic with 8-round clips. But they had one critical disadvantage for reconnaissance work. They were loud. A single M1 shot could be heard for 800 yards in the forest. Firing meant revealing your position. For scouts operating behind enemy lines, that often meant death. Corporal James Holbrook was the first scout Eli knew personally who died. Holbrook was from Billings, Montana, only 240 miles from Eli's hometown. They'd met during stateside training and recognized each other's mountain backgrounds immediately. Holbrook had worked as a hunting guide before the war. He and Eli had planned to start a guide service together after the war ended. Bitterroot Mountain Expeditions, they'd called it. 50-50 partnership. They'd shaken hands on it December 5th, 1944. On December 8th, Holbrook's patrol encountered a German squad at dawn near Krinkelt. The after-action report stated that Holbrook had fired his M1 Garand at enemy soldiers from approximately 60 yards. He killed 2 Germans. 7 others converged on his position within minutes. Holbrook's body was recovered 3 days later. He'd been 26 years old. Ely attended the brief field burial. Holbrook was wrapped in a shelter half and buried in frozen ground. The chaplain spoke for 4 minutes. Ely didn't cry. He walked back to his tent, sat on his cot, and stared at his equipment for 2 hours. The deaths continued. December 9th, Private First Class Robert Chen, Seattle, Washington, killed after his rifle shot revealed his position to German patrol. December 11th, Staff Sergeant Thomas Kowalski, Detroit, Michigan, killed after engaging German soldiers with M1 Garand from 40 yards. German reinforcements arrived within 3 minutes. December 13th, Corporal David Martinez, Santa Fe, New Mexico, found dead with empty M1 Garand. Had fired all 8 rounds before being overwhelmed. The division's reconnaissance capability was being systematically destroyed. Battalion commanders issued increasingly desperate orders. Avoid engagement. Observe only. Report enemy positions without combat. But German patrols were active and aggressive. Scouts couldn't always avoid contact. When contact occurred, scouts had 3 choices: fire their rifles and reveal their positions, attempt to flee and likely be shot in the back, or surrender and be captured. Between December 3rd and December 15th, 1944, American reconnaissance patrols in the 99th Infantry Division had a 38% casualty rate. No other specialty in the division approached that number. Ely noticed something nobody else seemed to consider. On December 14th, during a briefing on reconnaissance procedures, Major Harrison outlined approved engagement protocols. Ely raised his hand. "Sir, what about using something quieter than the Garand?" Major Harrison looked confused. "Private, the M1 Garand is the standard infantry rifle of the United States Army. It's what you're issued. It's what you'll use." "Yes, sir," Ely said. "But what if we're trying not to be heard?" "Then don't fire your weapon, Private." The briefing continued. Ely said nothing more. But that night, alone in his tent, Ely opened his field pack and removed something he'd carried from Montana, something he'd never mentioned in any equipment inspection: his grandfather's skinning knife. The knife was 11 inches long, forged from a single piece of carbon steel in 1887. The handle was elk antler, worn smooth by 57 years of use. Ely's grandfather had used it for field dressing elk, deer, and bear in the Montana wilderness. Ely had used it since age 12 for the same purpose. The blade held an edge better than any knife Ely had encountered. He could shave with it. He had shaved with it. Ely held the knife in the weak light from a single candle. He thought about Holbrook. He thought about the sound of an M1 Garand echoing through frozen forest. He thought about German patrols converging on that sound. He thought about how his grandfather had killed a charging grizzly bear in 1921 with this knife after his rifle misfired. Close range, silent, effective. Ely made a decision that violated every regulation in the U.S. Army Field Manual. On December 15, 1944, before dawn, Ely removed 4 of the 8 rifle rounds from his ammunition pouches. He wrapped the knife in canvas, secured it with cord, and placed it in his right ammunition pouch where the rifle rounds had been. The knife's handle protruded slightly, within easy reach. He left 4 rifle rounds in his left pouch, enough for genuine long-range threats, but not enough to tempt him to use the rifle as his primary weapon. At 600 hours, Ely departed on a reconnaissance patrol with Private Dale Hutchins, a 20-year-old from Ohio, who'd been assigned as Ely's partner 2 days earlier. Hutchins was nervous. He'd heard about the casualty rates. Ely told him to stay quiet and follow exactly. They moved northeast into the Ardennes forest, toward German-held territory. Their mission: identify any German troop concentrations or movements that might indicate offensive preparations. Command wanted them back by 1400 hours. At 0820 hours, they encountered fresh tracks, boot prints, German pattern, Approximately 12 men moving west, less than 30 minutes old. Eli gestured for Hutchins to take cover. They waited. At 0847 hours, they heard voices. German. Close. Maybe 50 yards. Standard protocol called for scouts to withdraw immediately upon hearing enemy forces. Report position. Avoid contact. But Eli saw something. Through the trees, approximately 60 yards ahead, a German officer stood consulting a map with two enlisted men. The officer wore insignia identifying him as a captain. Behind him, Eli could see what appeared to be a radio operator. This wasn't a standard patrol. This was a command element, the kind of target that could provide critical intelligence if captured or eliminated. Hutchins looked at Eli with wide eyes. He started to move backward, following doctrine. Eli held up one hand. Wait. The German captain folded his map and began walking. Not toward Eli's position, but parallel to it, moving south. The radio operator and two guards followed. The small group moved through the forest, clearly confident they were in secure German territory. Eli watched them. They'd pass within 35 yards of his position. Any other scout would have let them pass. Observe, don't engage, report back. Eli did something different. He handed his M1 Garand to Hutchins. He pointed at the ground. Stay here. Hutchins looked terrified but nodded. Eli moved. He'd been tracking animals through mountain forests since age 8. He knew how to place his feet to avoid sound, how to use terrain and vegetation for concealment, how to move when his target's attention was elsewhere. The skills that had allowed him to approach within 10 yards of elk without detection worked equally well on human targets. The forest floor was covered in snow, but beneath the snow was a layer of frozen pine needles, relatively quiet if you knew how to distribute your weight. Eli moved in a crouch, using the dense understory vegetation, timing his movement when the Germans were speaking or walking through noisier terrain. It took him 7 minutes to position himself 15 yards ahead of the German captain's projected path, concealed behind a fallen log and thick brush. The Germans approached. Eli could hear their conversation, something about artillery positions and coordinate timing. The radio operator was complaining about the weight of his equipment. The captain walked past Eli's position, 12 feet away. The two guards followed, rifles slung, relaxed. The radio operator came last, struggling with his heavy pack. Eli let the captain and guards pass. He focused on the radio operator. The operator moved past Eli's hiding spot. Eli rose from concealment. 3 steps, silent on the snow. His left hand covered the German's mouth from behind. The knife held in his right hand struck once. The German stiffened, then went limp. Eli lowered him silently to the ground. The entire action took 4 seconds. No sound beyond the faint rustle of equipment. The captain and guards continued walking unaware. Eli pulled the radio operator's body behind the log. He stripped the radio pack, an important intelligence item, and removed papers from the operator's jacket. He took the man's identification tags. Then he moved back toward Hutchins's position, carrying the radio. The entire engagement, from leaving Hutchins to returning with captured equipment, took 17 minutes. The Germans never fired a shot. They never knew an American scout had been within 15 feet of them. Hutchins stared at Eli, then at the radio, then at the blood on Eli's knife. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "What did you do?" Eli cleaned the knife with snow. "Got intelligence." He wrapped the radio pack. "We're going back." They returned to American lines by 12:30 hours, 90 minutes ahead of schedule. Major Harrison reviewed the captured radio and documents. The radio was a German field unit, relatively new model. The documents included map coordinates, unit identifications, and communication protocols. Intelligence officers examined everything immediately. Harrison looked at Eli. "Where's the German who was carrying this?" "Dead, sir." "How?" "Knife, sir." Harrison's expression shifted. "You killed a German soldier with a knife?" "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you shoot him?" "Didn't want to be heard, sir. There were 4 Germans total. If I'd fired my rifle, the other 3 would have known our position." Harrison stared at Eli for several seconds. "Show me the knife." Eli removed it from his ammunition pouch. Harrison examined the blade. "This isn't military issue." "No, sir. It's my grandfather's. You've been carrying a non-regulation weapon. Yes, sir. Harrison should have written Eli up for a violation of equipment regulations. Instead, he asked, "Can you do this again?" Eli thought about Holbrook, about Chen, about Kowalski, about Martinez, about the 23 scouts who died in 2 weeks because their rifles made too much noise. "Yes, sir," Eli said. Word spread through the reconnaissance scouts by evening. Private Hutchins told 3 other scouts about what he'd witnessed. Those scouts told others. By December 16th, every scout in the battalion knew that Eli Thornton had killed a German soldier silently, captured intelligence, and returned without alerting enemy forces. The implications were obvious. Scouts began seeking Eli out, asking questions. How do you approach without being heard? How do you move through snow quietly? How close do you need to be? What kind of knife works best? Eli answered honestly. You need to know how to move in forest. You need to understand sight lines and sound travel. You need to be close, within 15 feet, maybe 20 maximum, and you need to be willing to do it. That last point was critical. Killing with a knife required proximity and commitment that rifle combat didn't. Some scouts couldn't do it. Eli understood. He didn't judge, but some could. On December 17th, Corporal Michael Brennan, a scout from rural Vermont who'd worked as a trapper before the war, approached Eli. "I've got a hunting knife, 8-inch blade. I've killed deer with it. Can you teach me?" Eli spent 2 hours that afternoon showing Brennan movement techniques, approach angles, and strike methods. Brennan was a natural. He already understood forest stalking from his trapping experience. On December 18th, Brennan's patrol encountered a 2-man German observation post. Using techniques Eli had shown him, Brennan approached to within 10 feet and eliminated both Germans silently with his hunting knife. He returned with captured binoculars, maps, and documents identifying German artillery positions. The pattern began to shift. Between December 16th and December 24th, 1944, during the opening phase of the Battle of the Bulge, 11 American scouts in the 99th Infantry Division employed knife techniques for close reconnaissance work. They killed 31 German soldiers, captured 4 German scouts alive, and retrieved intelligence, including radio equipment, maps, communication codes, and unit identification documents. None of these American scouts were killed during these operations. The contrast with earlier methods was stark. Before December 16th, 23 scouts killed in 2 weeks, 38% casualty rate. After December 16th, 0 scouts killed during knife-based reconnaissance operations. The technique spread informally through practical demonstration and word of mouth. No official doctrine existed. No training manual mentioned it. Officers generally pretended not to notice. Results mattered more than regulations. Scouts began modifying their equipment. Some carried traditional hunting knives. Others carried military-issue trench knives or bayonets. A few obtained fighting knives from British commandos or Canadian troops who had formal close combat training. The specific blade mattered less than the technique and mindset. The knife wasn't a replacement for the rifle. It was a specialized tool for specific situations. Scouts still carried M1 Garands for long-range engagement and defensive situations. But for close reconnaissance, observation, and intelligence gathering behind enemy lines, the silent approach proved dramatically more effective and safer. German forces noticed the change. A German intelligence report dated December 28, 1944, captured after the war from Wehrmacht archives, noted, "American reconnaissance elements are employing new infiltration methods. Multiple German observation posts and patrol elements have been eliminated without rifle fire. Casualties suggest close-range knife attacks. American scouts are approaching positions silently and withdrawing without detection. Recommend increased security measures and paired observation posts." The German report recommended countermeasures, larger patrol sizes, more frequent position rotation, improved perimeter security. These measures reduced German patrol effectiveness and mobility, which benefited American defensive operations. But the German military never fully adapted. Their doctrine emphasized aggressive patrolling and maintained that rifle-armed soldiers should prevail in close combat. They didn't understand that American scouts weren't trying to prevail in combat. They were trying to gather intelligence and survive. The knife technique prioritized stealth, surprise, and escape over sustained engagement. By January 1945, as the Battle of the Bulge concluded, the 99th Infantry Division's reconnaissance scout casualty rate had dropped to 11%, less than one-third the December rate. Intelligence gathering improved substantially. Division Command credited enhanced fieldcraft and tactical adaptation. Official recognition of the knife technique was minimal and delayed. In March 1945, the 99th Infantry Division published an internal training memo titled Reconnaissance Methods in Forested Terrain. Page 7, paragraph 4 read, "Scouts may carry supplemental edged weapons for close-quarters situations where rifle fire would compromise position security. Such weapons should be maintained properly and used with appropriate training." That was the extent of official acknowledgement. No commendations were issued specifically for knife-based reconnaissance. No training program was formally established. No doctrine was officially changed. The technique remained semi-covert, passed informally between scouts who understood its value. Eli Thornton never received a medal for innovation or combat effectiveness. He received a Bronze Star in February 1945 for meritorious service in reconnaissance operations, the same award given to dozens of other scouts for standard performance of duties. He didn't care. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. Eli was in Germany, having participated in the occupation of the Ruhr Valley. He'd survived 7 months of reconnaissance operations. He'd completed 47 patrols. He'd personally eliminated 18 German soldiers, 12 with his knife, 6 with his rifle. He'd captured 3 German prisoners alive. He'd retrieved intelligence materials on 23 occasions. He was never wounded. In June 1945, Eli shipped back to the United States. He was discharged at Fort Lewis, Washington on July 12, 1945. His discharge papers listed his specialty as infantry scout, with no elaboration. He took a bus to Montana. He arrived in Darby on July 15th. The town held a small welcome ceremony for returning veterans, Eli and 4 others. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. A local reporter asked Eli what he'd done in the war. "Reconnaissance work," Eli said, walking through forests mostly. The reporter didn't ask follow-up questions. Eli returned to his father's sawmill. He worked as a sawyer, cutting timber into boards, the same work he'd done before the war. He lived in a small cabin 3 miles outside Darby. He didn't talk about the war much. In 1947, Eli married Rebecca Walsh, a schoolteacher from Hamilton, Montana. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Eli taught his son to track animals in the Bitterroot Mountains, the same skills his grandfather had taught him. He worked at the sawmill for 32 years. He retired in 1977 at age 57. He spent retirement hunting, fishing, and maintaining a large garden. He was known in Darby as a quiet man, reliable, good neighbor. Few people knew he'd served in World War II. Fewer still knew what he'd done. In 1989, a military historian named Dr. Robert Halloway was researching reconnaissance operations during the Battle of the Bulge. He was examining after-action reports from the 99th Infantry Division when he noticed an unusual pattern, a dramatic decrease in scout casualties in mid-December 1944, concurrent with increased enemy casualties and captured intelligence. Halloway requested detailed patrol reports. He found multiple references to close reconnaissance and silent approach methods. He cross-referenced casualty reports with scout rosters. One name appeared repeatedly in successful patrol reports: Elijah Thornton. Halloway located Eli in Montana in 1991. Eli was 71 years old, living in the same cabin outside Darby. The interview lasted 3 hours. Eli described the knife technique, the informal training, the spread of methods through word of mouth. He showed Halloway his grandfather's knife, still maintained and sharp after 104 years. Halloway asked if Eli felt he'd made a significant contribution to the war effort. "I did what made sense," Eli said. "Rifles are loud, knives aren't. If you're trying not to be found, you use quiet tools." Halloway asked if Eli felt he deserved more recognition. Eli shrugged. "The men who used the technique survived. That's what mattered. Recognition doesn't bring back the ones who died before December." Halloway published his research in 1993 in the journal Military History Quarterly. The article, Adaptive Tactics in World War II Reconnaissance Operations, dedicated 4 pages to the knife technique and credited Eli Thornton with its development. 17 veterans contacted Halloway after publication, confirming they'd used the technique and crediting it with their survival. The article had minimal impact on popular military history. It was cited in 3 subsequent academic papers. No major publication covered the story. No documentary featured it. Eli didn't mind. He said the article made too much of his contribution. Lots of scouts figured out similar things, he told a local newspaper reporter in 1994. I wasn't the only one who used a knife. I just did it first in our division. Elijah Thornton died on March 18, 2003 at age 83. The cause was heart failure. He died at home in his cabin, surrounded by his family. His obituary in the Missoulian newspaper ran 127 words. It mentioned his service in World War II in a single sentence. Eli served in the U.S. Army during World War II in Europe. No details, no specifics. The funeral was attended by 43 people. The ceremony lasted 35 minutes. A veteran from the local VFW post provided military honors, a flag folding, a rifle salute, taps. Rebecca Thornton kept Eli's grandfather's knife. In 2008, she donated it to the Ravalli County Museum in Hamilton, Montana. It's displayed in a small exhibit on local World War II veterans. The placard reads, "Knife owned by Elijah Thornton, WW2 veteran, used for hunting in the Bitterroot Mountains." Nothing about reconnaissance, nothing about the 31 German soldiers, nothing about the 11 scouts who learned from him, nothing about the technique that reduced casualty rates by 2/3. In 2019, Dr. Halloway, retired but still researching, contacted the U.S. Army Center of Military History. He proposed a formal study of adaptive reconnaissance tactics in World War II, with Eli Thornton's knife technique as a primary case study. The proposal was declined. The response cited limited resources for historical projects focusing on non-doctrinal innovations. Halloway published a book in 2021, The Quiet Warriors: Unrecognized Innovations in World War II Combat. Chapter 7 covered Eli's story in detail. The book sold 200 copies, mostly to military history enthusiasts and academic libraries. Today, at the Ravalli County Museum in Hamilton, Montana, you can see an 11-inch knife with an elk antler handle in a glass display case. The blade is still sharp. The handle is still smooth from decades of use. Most visitors don't notice it. It's in a corner, part of a larger exhibit on logging and hunting in western Montana. The World War II section is small, 3 display cases among dozens covering 150 years of local history. But if you look closely at the knife, you can see faint scratches on the blade. Maintenance marks from careful sharpening over 116 years. And if you know the story, you can understand what that knife represents. It represents a 24-year-old logger from Montana who recognized that sometimes the quietest weapon is the most effective. It represents 11 scouts who learned a technique that saved their lives. It represents a fundamental principle that military doctrine often misses. The best solution isn't always the obvious one, and innovation doesn't always come from headquarters. It represents men like James Holbrook, who didn't survive to see December 16, 1944, but whose death pushed his friend to find a better way. And it represents the thousands of small innovations in every war, the improvised solutions, the field expedient techniques, the practical adaptations that never make it into official doctrine, but save lives anyway. Elijah Thornton's knife is in a museum in Montana. His name appears in 1 academic article and 1 specialized history book. His obituary mentioned his service in a single sentence. But between December 16, 1944 and the end of the war, the technique he developed was used by an estimated 40 to 60 American reconnaissance scouts. It directly contributed to the elimination of at least 75 German soldiers, the capture of significant intelligence materials, and most importantly, the survival of dozens of scouts who would have otherwise been killed using conventional methods. That's not in any official record. It's not in any doctrine. It's not on any monument, but it's true. If this story moved you, if you believe that men like Eli Thornton deserve to be remembered, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so more people can learn about these forgotten heroes, and drop a comment below. Are you a veteran? Did someone in your family serve? Where are you watching from? We want to hear from you. These stories only survive if people like you keep them alive. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering.